So, we are in 1 Samuel in chapter 5 this evening. We're going to do the whole chapter, believe it or not, because it's only 12 verses. But the title of the message is The Heavy Hand of God. You're going to see that repeated in this text as we go through it. Let's begin, though, by reading the whole chapter. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face on the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. And when they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both its palms, both of the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any who came into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod. And he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us, and Dagon our God." Therefore they sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" And they answered, "Let the ark of God, the God of Israel, be carried away to Gath." So they carried the ark of God of Israel away. So it was, after they had carried it away, that the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great, and tumors broke out on them. Therefore they sent the ark of God to Ekron. So it was, as the ark of God came to Ekron, that the Ekronites cried out, saying, "They have brought the ark of God of Israel to us to kill us and our people." So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, "Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it go back to its own place, so that it does not kill us and our people." For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city. The hand of God was very heavy there. And the men who did not die, were stricken with tumors, and the cry of that city went up to heaven. Now, last week, we came to the end of an era, if you remember. We had the fulfillment of this prophecy that God gave to this young boy Samuel while he was sleeping. God called him, "Samuel, Samuel." He went to Eli. Eli kept sending him back until finally Eli said, "Oh, it must be God. So next time, listen to what he says." And God tells Samuel this prophecy about Israel, about Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas and his sons. That he's done. They're done. There will never be an individual from their line in the priesthood because of their defiling of the temple. Hophni and Phinehas were stealing meat from the sacrifice by force, eating what wasn't supposed to be theirs, and they were sleeping with the ladies at the door to the tent, the tabernacle. And Eli didn't do anything about it. He just said, "You shouldn't do that. That's not good." But he didn't take any action. So God said, "That's it. They're going to die. Your boys are going to die." And what we saw was that there was this great battle. And in the battle, the Philistines conquered the Israelites. 4,000 people were killed. And so the Israelites, instead of going to Samuel and saying, "What should we do? What does God want us to do?" They say, "Hey, here's what we're going to do. Let's go to Shiloh. Let's get the ark, and let's put that in front of us. And then we have to win. We can't lose if we've got the ark with us." So they're essentially treating the ark like a lucky charm. So they do that. They go and get the ark. They bring it in front of them. They're not thinking at all about the power of God, just about this ark. And they go out to battle. And the slaughter is even greater. 30,000 men are slaughtered the second time. And they had the ark. And not only that, this time the ark is captured by the Philistines. And they come back. Somebody runs from the battle and he comes to Shiloh. And Eli's sitting there, it says next to the road. By this time, Eli's a heavy man, very heavy, sitting down. He can't see very much anymore. So the guy runs by him, goes into the city, proclaims about the devastation that the ark has been captured. The people are wailing and mourning, and Eli hears this. He's like, what's going on? So the young man runs over to Eli and tells him. He tells him that there was a great devastation, a great slaughter for Israel. He tells him that his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. Eli's listening. He expected that. And then he tells him, and the ark was captured. And at that, Eli falls off his seat, breaks his neck, and dies. That wasn't it. Then the wife of Phinehas, she hears this news. She's pregnant. Her husband's gone off to be with the ark. And she hears this news also, that her father-in-law is dead. Her husband's dead. But then when she hears about the ark, she goes into labor. She has the baby. She dies, and as she's dying, she says, the glory has departed, and she names her son Ichabod, which that's what it means. The glory has departed. That's her last words. The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured. And that's the end of this era of Eli and Hophni and Phinehas and Israel, everyone doing what was right in their own eyes. Now we come into this time with Samuel being the new priest, and he's going to essentially soon, relatively soon, he's going to anoint the monarchy, the first king of Israel. It's this new season. But we're not done. God's not done with what's happening with the ark here. We've seen that Yahweh is not going to allow the ark to be treated as some kind of lucky charm with Israel. But now we're going to see he's not going to allow the ark to be treated as a trophy of victory either. We're going to break this text down into three sections. We're going to see, first of all, verses 1 and 5, that Yahweh, not Dagon or any other false god, reigns supreme. Yahweh does. And then from verses 6 through 10, we're going to see that treating Yahweh as any other god will not be tolerated. And then we'll see in those last two verses, verses 11 through 12, that Yahweh's glory will prevail. It will be restored. Let's look at verses 1 through 5. And we see that Yahweh here, he reigns supreme in this text. It says, then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. So after the Philistines, the victors, won, they take the spoils, of course. And they bring the spoils to Ashdod. If you look at the map I put in your notes, you can see Ashdod was this port city on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea there. And there was essentially 5 key cities that the Philistines had, and they would get together and they would have like a kind of a mini United Nations with these 5 cities. They were the most important cities to the Philistines. They were Gaza, you see them on the map there, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and then you go to the east and you've got Ekron, and then a little bit south you've got Gath. And they're mentioned in the text because they work together. So what did the Philistines do with the ark? They captured the ark. What did they do with it? Well, the text says when the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house or the temple of Dagon. And they set it by Dagon. Well, most likely they didn't just bring it in and set it next to Dagon. Most likely they brought it in and they set it before Dagon as a kind of like, this is for you because you're the one who conquered Yahweh. Dagon did it. So it's being treated as some kind of spoil of war, as an idol. They put it in the temple, placing it at Dagon's feet. So it's not just a symbol of victory over Israel. We got to understand this. This is a symbol. This is showing the people of that Dagon had victory over Yahweh. Not just Israel. Dagon was superior. Dagon reigned supreme over Yahweh. That's what they're trying to get across here. So who was this god named Dagon? Well, surprisingly, usually when I'm doing these studies, I can find a lot of information on these false gods, like Diana. You can find a lot of information. Dagon, there's not a lot of information about Dagon. There's a little bit, but not a lot. It appears that Dagon was probably one of the chief gods of the Philistines. Some believe that this was a fish god because the name for fish is the Hebrew word dag. So people will say, oh, he must have been a fish god. And you'll see pictures online that are drawn to look like a fish god. That's just made up. We don't know what this god looked like. And some will say, well, he must have been the god of fish, the god of the sea. Well, there's another view that says it was the god of grain or agriculture, because the word Dagon for the god, you change it just a little bit to Dagan. Instead of an O, you put an A in there, and it means grain. It means agriculture. That's what I believe. I believe this is the god of agriculture, Dagon. Others say they have different views, but those are the two primary views. And I would say Dagon was the god of agriculture. But regardless, what the Philistines, that really doesn't matter. The Philistines, what they do is they bring the ark in, and they presumably say that Dagon is victorious over Yahweh, and they put the ark at the feet of Dagon, and then you can be sure they had a celebration, had a party, a drunken, carousing music celebration all night. This was just the par for the course for those nations when they conquered somebody. They'd have this great celebration. And so they do this. But they get up the next morning and there's something different. The priest, let's read the text. Verse 3 says, "And when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord." So the priests are coming into wherever Dagon is in his temple or his house, whatever, and they see Dagon flat on his face. Now, they probably just thought, we were all having a good time last night, drinking a lot. Maybe there was a tremor, earthquake or something, a little one, and it fell down. No big deal. They weren't concerned. But we see something in the text that indicates Dagon didn't just tumble over and fall on the ground near the ark. No, it specifically tells us that it had fallen, what? On its face before the ark. That's significant. It was prostrate before the ark, in a posture of worship. But they didn't catch that. It should have indicated to the Philistines that their false god wasn't victorious. Dagon was not dominant over Yahweh, but they just miss it completely. And it shouldn't surprise us. They're pagans. They're just treating the ark like they would any other of these various gods. And then notice, to top it off, we see that the ark is being referred to here differently than usual when it's in the context of the Philistines. Usually it's referred to as the ark of the God of Israel, the Elohim of Israel. That word Elohim can be used for false gods. It can be used for Yahweh. It can be used for angels. Sometimes it's used for men. Elohim isn't a personal name of Yahweh. And so usually they say the ark of Elohim. Here, though, in this right here, it says it had fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of Yahweh. Yahweh. This is how the ark is being referred to here, so that's significant. Back to the text. Dagon is on its face. Apparently, they're thinking it was just a fluke. They see him laying there. So what do? They pick it back up. They put it in its place. It says they took Dagon and set it in its place again. What kind of a God is this? A God that needs man to pick him up and put him back in his place. I was thinking about this as I was reading, and I thought, it's like a museum curator. He comes in early in the morning to his museum, and he's got these great statues of, say, Alexander the Great, maybe Julius Caesar, and he walks in, and oh no, the statue's on its face, and they're about to open the doors, and he calls his assistant, come here, hurry up, we got to get this thing, lift it up. So they're picking up the statue, and the wig falls off, and they're trying to put it on, the arm is bent back. Oh, maybe it fell down, and one of the thongs of the sandals ripped, and God forbid it broke its nose. Oh no, we can't have the people seeing this. It's laughable. The priests are doing the same thing here. They're trying to take the whole thing so serious. But the whole event just shows how silly a prospect it is that Dagon is able to do anything. It's just a statue. But they're acting like he really has power. This is a picture of the foolishness of idolatry. When the foolishness is right in front of we do this all the time. There's foolish things that we worship. Maybe not intentionally, but there's things that we worship. And we can see the foolishness of worshiping these things, yet when they fail us, we dust them off, pick them up, put them back on their pedestal, and continue worshiping them. When just like Dagon, we're like, they can do nothing. We all do it. Presumably here, though, after picking the idol back up, everyone just goes about their day as usual. Another day, work, doing everything. But then something happens more significant the next day. They go to bed, they get up the next morning. Verse 4 says, and when they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon, fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord again. But here it says, the head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off, or you could translate that, sliced off on the threshold, and Dagon's torso was left of it. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. So not only was it tipped over this time, but its head and its hands were cut off. So you just have this torso was left of it. And that really, what you're looking at there is what this thing is, just a block of marble or whatever it is sitting there. That's what it is, really. But this would have had a huge impact on those who were present. Because you see, this is what's done to the defeated. Understand? Not to the victor. To the defeated. When the kings or the emperors or the generals would defeat an army, oftentimes they'd go in and they'd cut the heads off. They'd cut the hands off. And they'd either use the hands and the heads to count how many people were killed, or as a trophy. They'd say, look what we got. Look what we did. Even the Romans, the Romans wanted to pretend that they were more civilized than the barbarians, but oftentimes the Romans would cut the heads off. They would put them on stakes and put them outside the city for anyone to see. This is what happens if you mess with Rome. You see, but that's what the victors did. And so this is telling us that Yahweh is the victor, not Dagon. He's victorious, regardless of the defeat of Israel. That was according to his purposes. But apparently here, the leaders, those who are leading in the Philistine camp, they still don't get it. Verse 5 points out that their response to the priests, by the priests, to the head and the hands laying on the threshold of the temple, isn't to rethink what's going on here and to say, well, maybe Yahweh is maybe this God of Israel. We better think about this greater. No, they just get more superstitious. It says, therefore, neither the priest of Dagon nor any who came into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. So when you come into Dagon's temple, don't step on the threshold where the head and the hands were. I thought about my granddaughter was staying with us this past weekend. And Kim and I were taking her for a walk, and we were both holding her hands. And every time we'd come to a line in the sidewalk, she'd want to jump over the line. Jump over the line. And I remember when I was a kid, it was step on a crack, break your mom's back. I don't know why, but this is the kind of foolishness that they're dealing with here. Don't step on the threshold where the head and the palms and the hands were. It's ridiculous. The bottom line is, no matter what the Philistines think about Yahweh, He's shown Himself to be supreme over this foolish pagan deity. Next, the text moves from showing us that Yahweh is supreme over Dagon to showing us that the Lord will not be mocked. So He's showing them that He's supreme over this false god, but He's not going to be mocked by these people either, who actually put the ark in the temple. Even though the Philistines were permitted to defeat Israel on the battlefield, the Lord's not going to be mocked, and those who have the ark are going to be greatly afflicted. It's a severe affliction. Look at verses 6 and 10. It says, but the hand of the Lord was heavy upon the people of Ashdod, and He ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. So, as we said, the hand of Dagon was cut off, representing defeat, but here the hand of Yahweh was heavy on the people of Ashdod. There's a play on words there. The hand of Dagon was cut off. It's nothing. It's just a lump of marble. The hand of God was heavy on these people of Ashdod. He ravaged them. The Hebrew just means He astonished, He stunned them in a magnificent way. It's a widespread epidemic that's taken place here. And it says tumors. Ravaged them and struck them with tumors. Now the Hebrew word there, it literally means hills, mounds. So they were afflicted with these raised bumps all over their bodies. These raised mounds on their flesh. This was likely a plague, some kind of plague. You think of the bubonic plague. They had these raised mounds, something like that. How do we know this? Well, we don't for sure, but we can ascertain what's going on here just by looking at the text, because we can see that in chapter 6, verse 4, which we'll look at later, and verse 11 and verse 18, that rodents, mice, rats, they're a part of the equation here. It's likely that God was using what we would call the bubonic plague or the plague. He's using that here to judge these people. And you see that later when they send the ark, they're putting rats. They're dealing with rats. That's a hint for us. Remember, here's again, Ashdod it's a port city. You look at that map. Thus, they're all too familiar with the arrival of plagues coming on these ships from pestilence. But the difference is this time, it's the judgment of God. It's not just any sickness. This is the judgment of God. But whatever the details and the source of the tumors, the men of Ashdod knew that they had to get rid of the ark of the God of Israel. Well, they thought maybe they had to get rid of the ark. It says in verse 7, and when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us, and Dagon, our God, to say the least. But they didn't have a complete understanding of Yahweh, remember. But they knew enough to determine that they had to get rid of this thing. We got to get rid of this box. Maybe this is it. So what are they going to do? Well, we would think, well, why don't they just conquered Israel, so why don't they send a representative to talk to Samuel? He'll tell them what to do. He's the priest. But no, that's not what they do. The text says, therefore they sent and gathered, said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? So there again, they go and they call the representatives from these 5 cities. Let's come together. Let's talk about this. They get together and they decide what they're going to do. But rather than understand that the problem is not the physical box, but the disregard for Yahweh, which Samuel would have told them, they decided to just get the ark out of Ashdod. Let's just get it out of here. And they answered, let the ark of God of Israel be carried away to Gath. So they carried the ark of God, the God of Israel, away. Well, that seems odd. You've got these representatives from these 5 different cities. Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, Gath, Ekron. And so they're sending the ark away from Ashdod, but they're sending it to another one of these cities, to Gath. I mean, you believe that the thing that you have in your presence is causing the tumors and the afflictions, but rather than get rid of it, rather than burn it or crush it or destroy it, you pass it down the line. Well, maybe it's not so odd. It shows us that perhaps they weren't 100% convinced that it was the ark. Maybe the ark's not the issue, but maybe it is. Maybe God's not dealing with them because they disregarded him. Maybe they're thinking, let's just send it to Gath and everyone will see that this pestilence is just a normal pestilence. The people are all worked up. They think it's this box. It's not. Let's just send it to Gath and prove it. So that you got this council of 5 men, presumably, from each city, and they're trying to decide what to do with it, and that's what they come up with. Well, the people are just a little weird. Let's just get rid of it, get it out of here, and they'll see that it's just a plague. It's just a normal sickness. It has nothing to do with this box. And then when you put it that way, you can understand why the representative from Gath might have said, yeah, give it to us, and we'll show them that it's just you guys. It's just something that's taking place there. We'll take this box. We're not afraid. But then look what happens. Verse 9. So it was, after they had carried it away, here it is, that the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great, and tumors broke out on them. Well, yeah, they brought it to a different city, but the result is the same. The hand of the Lord was hard against them. However, they're still not convinced it's Yahweh. So they send it to another one of the 5 cities. They ship it to Ekron. And if you look at that map, you can see Ekron they sent it to Gath over here. Gath was a little bit south. Then they send it up north to Ekron. You're getting farther and farther away. That's the northernmost point where they can bring it, is to Ekron. But they bring it there. Verse 10 says, therefore, they sent the ark of God to Ekron. So it was, as the ark of God came to Ekron, that the Ekronites cried out, saying, they have brought the ark of God of Israel to us to kill us and our people. So the leaders may not think this is a big deal. The people are fed up, though. They're like, hey, what are you doing? Don't bring that thing here. Sort of like our leaders in our country. So a lot of them aren't connected with the people. They just, I'm not going to go into that. But I was thinking of certain wars and things where it's like they're so disconnected. They're running the war from their cabinet. And these guys were saying, oh, let's just send it to Ekron and we'll test it again. The people are like, no, you're sending that thing here, it's going to kill us. And the fact that the ark is just a representative and has no power in and of itself is starting to occur to the people. It's not the ark, it's Yahweh. And that brings us to the next portion of the text, and we see that God's glory will be restored. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines. Again, let's get these guys together, and said, "Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it go back to its own place, so that it does not kill us and our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city. The hand of God was very heavy there. And the men who did not die were stricken with the tumors. And the cry of the city went up to heaven." So you can see over and over and over, the hand of the Lord is heavy upon the people that have treated the ark as a spoil of victory, in turn stating that their God is greater than Yahweh. Oh, that first plan doesn't work, so they gather the council together again, and they finally agree that the problem is the God of Israel. And to remedy this, they decide to send the ark back to where it belongs, what they should have done in the first place. They may have conquered the army of Israel, but they didn't conquer the God of Israel, and they're realizing that now. They're realizing they just conquered Israel, but this God is too much for us. He's the Almighty, and His glory will not be taken or besmirched or given to Dagon at all, or any god. And there's an irony here in chapter 5, though. If the Philistines thought at the end of the battle in chapter 4 that Israel's loss of the ark was their gain, they learned very quickly that they were wrong. The loss of the ark of Israel wasn't their gain at all. It was to their destruction as well. Instead of being their trophy representing victory over Yahweh, Yahweh brought them to their knees. And He brought many of them to their grave. And again, it wasn't the ark itself. It was Yahweh doing this. He brought them to their knees. It was the hand of the Lord that was heavy on the people, not the power of the ark. And we need to remember that. So what can we learn from all this? There's plenty of things we can learn, but we can learn that no matter who it is that opposes or disobeys the Lord, they will not prosper. And even more poignant, they'll be broken. They disobey or oppose the Lord. It may take time. We may not see it, but they will not prosper. In chapter 4, it was the people of Israel. Specifically, the people of Israel, but also Hophni and Phinehas and Eli. They weren't honoring the Lord. Chapter 5, it was the Philistines. And in both cases, the Lord dealt with them through judgment. And in the end, He was glorified. He will be glorified. He can't be manipulated by those who confess Him, as the Israelites tried to manipulate Him with the ark. They wanted to get Him to do what they wanted Him to do. It won't happen. And He can't be managed by those who defy Him. The Philistines, they wanted to manage God. They wanted to say, we've beaten this God. This ark represents Him. So we're going to put Him in our temple. It's not going to happen. God will always be glorified. So how will this all end regarding the transfer of the ark back to Israel? Because now that's what they're going to do. They're going to send it back to Israel. Well, that's what we're going to look at next week. We're going to see how this plays itself out as the ark is on its way back to Israel. Does it go right to Israel? Is there a stop in between? How do the Philistines decide they're going to tackle this task? We'll see that next week. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank You so much for this wonderful book. As I read it and as I study it, it's just such a blessing, such a reminder of Your grace, Your mercy, your judgment, but also your kindness and your patience. I'm just overwhelmed with your goodness as I look at this text in the Old Testament. I pray that each one here would diligently dig into the book of 1 Samuel, also Revelation, they're reading on Sunday mornings, and that they would just be blessed by this. And they would see the connections that are all over in these books. It's such a blessing. Thank you for each one who took the time to be here this evening. They could have chosen to go anywhere, to do anything, but they chose to be here, to hear the Word of God. And that's, Pastor Dave and myself don't take that lightly. We are humbled by that, and we just pray that you would be glorified through it. We give all glory and honor to you in Christ's name. Amen.